So you waited all this time to learn what is a data commons. So what a data commons, let's see, I'll just give you the definition that is by Robert Grossman from the University of Chicago, who is one of the co-PIs in the NIH data commons, where I was also a co-PI, and we worked together on that. And data commons, as he defines it, brings together or collocates data with cloud computing infrastructure and commonly used software services, tools, and applications for managing, analyzing, and sharing data to create an interoperable resource for a research community. This sounds very similar to all the things we're talking about here when we're thinking of the open cloud, the services that can be provided within, the data that needs to be available in the cloud, and all the resources that can be scaled. But what are the differences about when I'm thinking about, well, we're talking about a data commons, and rather than just a bunch of services, software tools in the cloud and data, is the important part of to make it a commons is the integration, the interoperability about all these pieces to make it a seamless workflow for research, for the research lifecycle, for working on data analysis, data processing, data exploration, visualization, anything that you are going to do with the data, having in one side all the active research, they're available for you, and all the tools that you need for your active research available, as, from data collection, if you're collecting it directly from an instrument, or surveying it, or from sensors, or from any other sources, to cleaning, processing, analyzing, exploring, and visualizing. But then the other important part that we usually miss when we're working on research and just focusing on the research results, right, is all the data management and all the long-term access or archival or preservation that will help us to have the data there when it's needed for whether it is for validating results from the original study, or for reusing it because it's very valuable data that can be reused for accelerating, for new research in the future, right, or for merging with other data sets and so. But to do that correctly, you need to have a set of other services and tools that will facilitate that, like, for example, having global persistent identifiers, metadata that describes the data, that makes it discoverable, so you can know that data set exists, and you know how to access it. Some of the standards or data dictionaries or control vocabularies that will help you to understand that this variable here is the same as this variable here, and you could merge, harmonize data sets. The provenance, the versions to understand what data set you used for a specific research result, right? And provide all the access controls that go with that, and data curation and so. So when you're talking about a data commons, it's bringing all these pieces together, the active research, the data management on the cloud with lots of storage and computing resources. Here are a couple of examples of what a data commons can be. Australia has started the Australian Research Data Commons, and in this case is a set of services that work well together to support researchers in the cloud and access to data. For more specific domain-centric data commons, an example is the Genomic Data Commons by NIH. And in this case, they provide all the specific tools that are needed for not only accessing the data, but also exploring that data and merging it with other data sets. So what do we intend to do to be, well, the Harvard Data Commons to be? How it is different to these data commons that I showed you. So first of all, just to clarify, the Harvard Data Commons is as of now just in a proposal phase, and during these years certain pilots to understand what architecture we need, and understanding the use cases that we need to support. So, and it's a collaboration among the different units within Harvard, the library, the Harvard IT, the research computing, the Harvard Dataverse, but also multiple schools. The initial schools that are part of it are the medical school, the School of Public Health, and the business school, but the intention is for all the Harvard schools. And everything that I'm talking about for Harvard Data Commons is something that one could apply to another institution. So you could imagine a similar collaboration for another research institution that wants to provide a data commons for their researchers. And what does it bring together? So in this diagram, just putting examples of all the pieces that are all the tools that could be integrated with that data commons. So there might be Jupyter notebooks. We'll hear from Rory about RSpace as electronic lab notebooks used in the lab, right, and to track the data. And so might be researchers using RStudio, researchers using GitHub for the code. And then what we want to do is that bring snapshots of that research into a repository, in this case, the Harvard Dataverse repository, so that we're tracking what's happening during the research cycle, right, or workflow, but not only just by putting a bunch of files in a place and pointing to that, but actually building whether it's within a container or a capsule or so, building some metadata provenance that are added to the data and the code and the workflows that are part of the research, the outputs of the tools that researchers are using, and connecting that to the data. So that's where this interoperability middleware takes a role, right? And it helps to take all these outputs and add value to it so they can be tracked in a way that follows research data management. If you're not familiar with the importance that is now given into research data management in research organizations, institutions, depending on where you're working on or in industry, that might not be a topic, but this is becoming really critical for a lot of universities, or a lot of academic institutions, and is more generally for any research organization, where for one thing, if you want to be compliant with some of the data sharing requirements for funding agencies or from journals that will require to have access to your data when you publish the paper, right? You would want to start from the beginning with a data management that allows you to track all the workflow of your research, the data, the code, and everything else. But we want to make it very easy for researchers. We don't want to have to ask them to have to track all those things as they go along and have to document constantly. And so the idea of this middleware that as part of the data commons is to facilitate with some tools that are already doing that from the outputs of the tools and services they are using. And then this gets deposited into Harvard Dataverse. Those data sets with the code and everything and metadata are still unpublished. They cannot be found by by the users outside the community, but they can be found within the Harvard research community, right? So you can accelerate collaboration by the fact that they have unpublished data sets that you know exist in the next school, in the next department, and so on. You could start you could ask for access to them. But that, when I define this within Harvard, you could think of another community that is Harvard and other universities, and so make that data commons larger. So the concepts still apply. So, and this all lives on top of NESI and NERC and MGHPCC as part of this of the open cloud efforts. So some of from the last couple of minutes, the new features that this will bring, or the last minute, the new features will be the idea of a dashboard where you can find these unpublished data sets for the research community, right? And not only the published ones that you can already find now if you go in the Harvard Dataverse repository, but also these ones that are still researchers are doing active research, but you would want, I mean, not only for the research community is a useful tool to have, but also for the institution to know where are the data sets that researchers are using within my university, right? And where they're located, what metadata is associated with it, and what conditions or data agreements or terms apply to them. So the other piece is that is this interoperability middleware that allows you, facilitates adding metadata and provenance to the outputs of the research tools and then facilitate the deposit through the APIs to the repository. And the third new feature is the integration of the repository with multiple trusted remote storages where you could have sensitive data or very large data sets, so that metadata can be found in the repository, but the data you access it in these remote storage agents. And these we plan to leverage some of the work done in RENCI. Today we heard some talk from RENCI at the University of North Carolina, a project called Impact, and as much as possible, the idea is to leverage a lot of the existing tools and technologies for the data commons and build the interoperability, this integration on top. So thank you.